This is Conversations with the Citizen. I'm your host, Tia Carol Jones. I'm here today with Charise Williams, candidate for the 1st Congressional District. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a proud single mom of a 21-year-old junior at Morehouse, who I just found out he made Dean's List yesterday. So I'm very, very excited. Yeah, we've had a rocky history. He was not going to make it his first couple years. First year and a half, he was getting C's, and I can't pay for C's at Morehouse. So I'm very excited about that. I'm from Chicago. I actually grew up on 87th and Stony with my mom, and then split half of that time with my dad in Harvey. So my parents divorced when I was relatively young, and have a bonus mom who they're both retired now, and she worked at Workers United for 20 years in the labor movement. I have a master's in public policy from the University of Chicago, and my father's Marine. My mother's a CPS teacher for 25 years, and particularly around special education. She was a special ed teacher for 25 years. And it's because of them, it's why I'm here today. I used to work at Lincoln Limited. I was a student.
Okay.
I was a student of Link. That's how I was able to go to Mother Macaulay. And then I worked there in 2007 from 2011. And it's because of that why I went to grad school, just briefly, and stumbled into this world of government and politics. I wanted to just save the world. That was my initial goal.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why did you want to run for the 1st Congressional District?
Well, yeah, I grew up, like I said, on 87th and Stony, and went to school at Mother Macaulay. So I had to take the 87th Street bus from 87 to the 95th Street train station. I took the train and then took the 10 tray 103rd Street bus from State Street to Mother Macaulay. And that route still looks exactly the same today as it did when I went to school 20 years ago. So when this opportunity happened, and a few people asked me to think about it, honestly, they asked me about 2 years ago to run. But at that time, I had just started working for for ICEJA, doing grants, and it was this great opportunity to be able to give money to my community to just reform and relook how we do funding. And I wasn't going to run at that time because I wanted to do this skill. So when he retired, I was asked again and decided to do it once I realized that the main job, so one, there's no real job description of a congressperson, right? Do you remember that cartoon, The Bill, what a bill is?
The Schoolhouse
The
Rock.
Schoolhouse Rocks.
Yes.
I wish we had that for congressmen. But what they're supposed to do is create and implement legislation and provide resources and opportunities to their constituents, right? That's the job, in essence. My day job at ICEJA was learning and successfully bringing resources to the state. And the 1st District deserves those resources. We have not had the influx of resources that other parts of our state have for a very long time. And we are in this opportunity, this time in history where we meaning our country, and particularly the state, will have an influx of billions of dollars. And honestly, I'm tired of us being ignored. I've been successful in obtaining federal funding. I'm actually the only one who's been able to, who can say that they applied for it and obtained federal funding on behalf of the state, and reimagined how to make sure that it was going to communities that needed it the most, right? So we designed equity grant making policy, designed an advanced payment policy, designed a working capital policy to help businesses and communities, and even just the smaller municipalities, so they get their resources immediately. And it would be criminal to just let that opportunity pass and have someone in this role who doesn't have the experience to do that. So I want to make sure that the 1st District is not continuously ignored. We have the largest population of African Americans, and I-57 shouldn't look the same way as it does today than it did 20 years ago.
How have you used your expertise in public policy to create legislation, city and statewide? You talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And how will you use it if elected to Congress?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of working on the Fight for 15 campaign for the city. And, that was a historical moment in itself, just as far as making, increasing federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. But even though that being said, $15 an hour is not enough, right? You can't really raise a family off of $15 an hour. And one of the things I'm advocating for is a livable wage. So right now, a livable wage gets a family for about $68,000 a year, which would increase the hourly rate to $16.48 if you break it down by hour. And $68,000 is still not a lot, but it's a little bit more than what we're getting right now as a starting salary for a livable wage as opposed to a minimum wage. So that's part of the legislation I plan to implement just from the experience from that. And on my state side, there's some legislation I'm very proud of, the legalization of recreational cannabis. So at ICEJA, we were, let me backtrack. While I was at the Chicago Federation of Labor, we ensured that there was a labor agreement in all applications dealing with dispensary craft grow. So we worked a lot to make sure that anyone who worked in the industry, they weren't taken advantage of by the industry, that they had good wages, they had a pension, they had health care, because the cannabis industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and to not pay people to do the work, again, it's just not okay. So taking that, once that passed, and using those, that legislation that was historic of its kind, the first one in the country to do an equity making around cannabis, recreational cannabis. This program called R3, which takes 25% of the revenue from the sales of tax cannabis, the sale of the tax revenue, and invest it back into the communities most impacted by the war on drugs. So that's my program. Okay. So we helped implemented it, we designed it, we did not have a road book. We did decent the first round, we did much better the second round, as far as being more intentional in ensuring that it went to Black and brown communities throughout the state. And even just something simple, I don't know, many people have applied for grants or have gotten turned down from grants just due to multiple reasons. So making sure that a small group of 5 people aren't competing with like a United Way for the same resources. So making it more equitable to get those resources, and also even designing a capacity institute and having, I call them like case life coaches, and taking smaller organizations and walking through from step 1 to step A through Z, right? Figure out how to write a grant, how to do a program narrative, how to become qualified to even receive the money to the very end, and then eventually they would get a grant, right? So helping building capacity in the community also is a piece of legislation I'm very proud of. In addition to that, we worked with the crime bill, it's now the Safety Act bill, around police immunity, so that police can stop hiding behind their badge and be held accountable for when things go wrong, and working with state's attorneys across the state to help them with deferred prosecution are kind of pieces of legislation I worked on while I was at ICEJA.
You were the first Black woman to serve as interim executive director at ICEJA. You have also been the first woman and person of color on the Hire 360 board. Mm-hmm. What have those first taught you about the importance of representation in spaces where critical, impactful decisions like access to employment and criminal justice are being made?
In short, representation matters, right? We hear the saying, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring your own chair. And that is probably no no true words have been spoken in any of those spaces. Government, just as a whole, is hard, and it's like moving a big ball up a hill in your slippers, right? It's just very slow and difficult. So having the right person at the table that actually can make changes. So one of the things I did when I was director is I did an audit of all the payroll of my staff, and saw immediately, and it was shocking, that of course my black and women were paid the lowest. So I immediately rectified that immediately, and not knowing why that didn't happen before. I know I read the reports that they had made request, but it wasn't done. So that was one of the first decisions I was to even make internally. Expand the growth of our staff. So when I got in, it was maybe around 50, more than doubled it under my leadership, both as the director and the chief of staff. And we have one of the most probably diverse agencies within the state, particularly in our leadership, senior leadership area. So I'm very, very proud of that. And it's important, in Hire 360, just a little bit about that, it's based in unions. So when I was at Hire 360, we know historically that trades have not been the most welcoming of women and people of color. And on Martin Luther King Day, 2019, I sat in the office with the president at that time, who's still there, is Bob Ryder, and said we have to do better. And we developed, at that time it was called the Hub, which eventually became Hire 360. Okay. And be very strategic in working with developers, general contractors, some of the largest trade groups, and a host of community groups, that there was a direct pathway from the community to the apprenticeship programs, and that they had jobs. So they weren't just doing the work, they also had work to do on the jobs. And you could imagine some of the rooms I walked into. Not only was I the only woman, I was the only color, I was the only person of color, I was the youngest, coming in there saying, this is what we need to do, and this is what it's going to look like, and how it's going to happen. Multiple rooms like that, and have birthed this Hire 360, which has great intentions. They have the Unite Here, a culinary institute. I mean, it's really made an impact. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. But the team now is really trying to work with the community to get it done, and are very responsive. I still get text messages from people when things go wrong, and try to figure it out, how to make it work. So being the first one, hopefully we get to the point where there's no more first. Mm-hmm. And in this role, I'll be the first woman, but I won't be the last woman. And I say this everywhere I go, is that once I'm getting in, I'm already building my succession plan. There should not be a space where there's not a succession plan in our community, especially for something like this, right? And I want another, hopefully, black woman or black child or black girl to come in and take my place. And that's what I want to start building from the moment that I start. Because, again, representation does matter, and being in the room, and also being in the room and having the best intentions in the room. Because you can put some people in the room that shouldn't be in the room, right? And say they're for people, but not really for people. I've been for people when nobody was looking, just because it was the right thing to do. And I'm looking forward to being in that room, and I'm looking forward to building that legacy, and then looking for someone to come in behind me and continue the legacy as I move on to my next bigger thing, whatever that may be.
How have you engaged the community in the last 4 years?
Yes. Well, as we all know, we're in this pandemic, and we learned very quickly to be flexible. So 4 years ago, I was working on labor. That's when we were obviously working on the minimum wage ordinance, and then the pandemic hit. And no one kind of knew how to navigate to still do community engagement within the pandemic. So we immediately worked with all organizations to get funding out to help them become more flexible with laptops, computers, and brought everybody together, right? So it was easy for me to bring community members in the room because I already had the relationships with them, so I didn't have to go find them. And we had a lot of calls and there was a lot of conversations via Zoom to see how we can best still serve because those needs were there. Right? Some of the things that we funded or was particular was the increase of domestic violence within the homes just because people were in homes. So being creative and working so that women and families still felt safe or had a safe place to go even during the pandemic. And you know, the one of the things that I had to do and be very creative in doing is seeing that even though we couldn't go outside, we still had to communicate or dropping stuff off at people's houses like hotspots so that they were able to either go to school or help with the laptop. I worked a lot with, like I said, my mom's a teacher, so we worked a lot with the schools, particularly with the families, because I don't know if you remember, they were trying to do that laptop thing at the CPS schools, and a lot of families weren't getting their laptops.
Oh, right.
Do you remember that? So we did a lot of driving around and picking up and dropping off laptops and leaving them on people's houses just so that youth could have access to get into the classrooms. Right? So my engagement starts very grassroots level from that to working with the comptroller to make sure that monies went out fast so that families or just organizations who were helping the families didn't have to wait 60, 90 days to get that. So working with it so that that agencies got reimbursed in 30 days or less. Right. So having those conversations and those partnerships from a kind of a more policy standpoint. So my engagement in the past 4 years it probably increased more. I think we became a lot more accessible just due to the fact that we didn't have to drive somewhere to see someone. It was more so, you know, hop on your phone and let's have this meeting real quick to see what we can get it done. So I think the engagement increased actually over the past couple of years. Just due to the accessibility, it became more accessible to engage with people.
What do you think is the single most important issue in the district?
Right, so I've talked to families and just everyone. Even on my way here, I was a little late, there was a gentleman sitting on his step I just reached out and talked to him. And the biggest thing is economics, right? The first thing he said was, food is too high and gas is too high. You go down to Mokina in Manhattan, he said the same thing. Food is too high, gas is too high. It's economics. It's dealing with the price of everything. And I think depending on where you go, some of it looks very different. So in the western part of the district, so like Joliet, New Lenox, that area, they're very concerned around this North Point, which is the trucking. Right? It's a very heavy truck industry. So there's safety concerns, there's road concerns. When you go, again, a little in the municipality in the Southland, the municipalities are struggling. Right? They don't have clean water. Some of the broadband is good, some of it's not. In Robbins, they just did 2,500 new sidewalks with funds that they got. Right? Here in the city, we all have sidewalks. Right? So the needs are different, but it's all economics. And being able to understand and address the diversity of the district is going to be important. So some of the infrastructure bill that's happening, so it's a $17 million infrastructure bill layered on top of what the state has, which is another $19 million infrastructure bill. On top of the ARPA money that's also there, is all these layers of money. And making sure that that goes to the people in the first district, right, is the economics. And I'll go back again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the wages piece of it is really important. And we see that everything is high, but our money isn't getting higher, our paychecks aren't getting bigger, but the prices are increasing. And so that inflation is skyrocketing while we're not able to manage and adjust that, regardless of where I think you go. And poor economics leads to increase in crime, it leads to decrease in health, right? It becomes a domino effect of just all the other things that affect our community.
How important do you think transparency and communication are when it comes to the role of an elected official?
It's a public servant. Elected officials are supposed to be servants, right? You are supposed to be able to provide opportunities. You are supposed to be able to serve the communities that elected you to represent them. Transparency and accessibility is key. One of the pieces of legislation that LaShawn Ford has actually put together for this General Assembly, this session that just passed, is that every organization, municipality, whomever, that got a drop of federal state funding would be on one website. You would know where it is, where it went to, what it's used for, and how you can help it. Contact information, phone number, email, name. So say someone was homeless, and they just typed in homeless, all the organizations that deal with that, or wages, or by topic, because you don't know what to look for, you don't know the name. And that goes to the accessibility and the transparency piece, so you know where your money went. I think it's very key. Especially in government, when you're dealing with other people's money, it's not your money. It's our money. It's our taxpayers' money. And from the accessibility and transparency piece, and how I'll take that just in my office, is very similar. Making sure that people got the information, they received it all various ways. So, yes, we're in a digital age where everything is on social media or, via the internet. But there's a large population, like our grandparents, who are not on social media, right? They are not in the digital age. So engaging them too with, mailers, phone calls, showing up, having those relationships, working relationships with people who can get various different types of information, right? Even from our dual language community or our immigrant community, where it's a little more challenging for them to get the information various ways. So understanding and making sure that you give the information in all different platforms so that everybody gets it consistently. So transparency is very key to it. I've been, just in my career, just what I've done, I've been that way because I believe in that. And I hold those accountable who aren't at the same time. You have to be able to do both. You have to have the transparency piece, but you have to hold those accountable who try to circumvent that.
What attributes and experience do you possess that sets you apart from the other candidates?
Yeah, there's a lot of us, isn't there?
Yes.
It's a lot of us. It's a lot of us. And we say this in the forum, right, that I think, as a whole, we all agree around different issues, right? The Tribune even just kind of said it too. On the article that they had, everyone kind of agrees with the general principles. But honestly, when it comes to me, you have to be able to have someone who knows what to do on day one, right? So, no, I won't know where the bathroom is because I haven't been in an office. But I'll know how to access and find the funding. I'll know who to talk to go get it. I understand the legislation that needs to be written and the wording in the legislation to make sure that it actually goes to the communities to where it's supposed to go, to the district. And then be able to make those calls and those relationships, because I've been in state government, to say, hey, to the SBA. So, side note, the SBA got $30 million in CARES funding in 2020. Then specifically for black businesses in Chicago, right? Be very specific. SBA didn't spend the money because no one told them to spend it, right? So the legislation was written.
Okay.
It was a targeted legislation, but there was a disconnect between whoever wrote the legislation and to the SBA to just simply call them, send an email and say, hey, $30 million needs to go to black businesses in Chicago. And the money just sat there. The SBA reported this last month.
Okay.
Right? So that is an example of someone not necessarily understanding the process. And black businesses to get the money that we're supposed to get, right? That was a misstep. I understand that process because I've been an agency. I've talked to the legislators. Whenever we got VOCA funding or VAWA funding, best believe I was getting calls from all the other congressmen and senators, Foster, Durbin, Chakowski, saying, we know you got this X amount of dollars of VOCA funding. This is where we need it to go. Show me the report of where all the money is going. I see that this area didn't get any. This is where, how we're going to reallocate to make sure money goes there. So understanding that process and those nuances, out of that 17 of us, no one can say they've done that, right? And I know it may not sound sexy, but it's very important. It's important to be able to take the money and the resources that the federal government has and be able to give it to the people, to us. And when that doesn't happen, then we lose out. And we've seen that we lose out. So how I set myself apart is I can do the job. I don't have the kind of political baggage that other people have. I have the vitality to stay there for the long run, to be able to get the chairmanships and rise in the ranks and leadership, to be able to bring all that back, where some others don't necessarily just have that same vitality. They just don't. And that's going to be important for this role, because there's just so much stuff that's happening, and we're in this time, we're in this state of emergency where we need someone who can be there and be an advocate for Congress, in Congress on behalf of the district, and be able to rise in the ranks so that we don't keep getting ignored as we have been.
Where can people go to find out more about you and your campaign?
So again, I'm Charise Williams. My website is Charise for Congress, CHARISE for FOR Congress.com. Various social sites, Charise for Congress on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Or you can come by the office. So we're at 111th and Longwood in the corner, and stop by there. We would love to have anyone. We're having a rally day this Saturday from 10 to 2 at the office for people just to come in and meet, canvas or phone bank, just ask questions. If anyone is around this Saturday, please come by there.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, is there anything else you want our audience to know?
Right. I understand that there's a lot of people in this race. I do. And I ask people to make educated decisions and not just go by a name that they may have heard once or twice. We're in this historical period where we have a chance for real opportunities and real change to happen in our areas and our communities. And it's important that you look at someone's history of being that change, right? Of having a real change agent and being successful at that. A lot of people are really good at whatever they've been doing, but then also someone who, with that, there may be a sense of baggage. So I'm from the community. The only people I have to answer to are people in the community. Those are my kingmakers, right, for the better word of saying it. So I ask that you research me, give me a call or email me, and understand that we need someone who is ready to start the minute that they get in, and who understands the historical significance of being able to bring higher wages, higher paying jobs, and pensions and infrastructure to our district.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Remember to make plans to join us again next week for Conversations with the Citizen, the place where real news